Let's take a look at the concept of operating leverage. Operating leverage deals with the composition of the firm's cost structure. That is, how much fixed costs are used relative to variable cost. Capital intensive industries are going to have high fixed costs. A good example of that would be the auto industry. Labor intensive industries have high variable costs. A good example of that might be the restaurant industry. So when we talk about leverage, it's a means of magnifying gains and losses. Whether it's financial leverage, that is using a lot of debt in your capital structure, or operating leverage, where you're using a lot of fixed cost in your cost structure. What happens when you use a lot of fixed costs? You're using operating leverage. And what happens? As production increases, a firm with a high percentage of fixed costs, for example, using robotics, is not going to see its costs rise very quickly. Why is that? Because robots don't require breaks, they don't demand overtime pay, so you can use them more if you're producing more. There will be other costs involved, such as maintenance costs, but it's likely not to be proportionately so. On the other side, if production falls, costs will fall more slowly. Why? Because you can't lay off the robots. You're still paying that fixed cost to finance them, so your costs are going to fall slowly. A firm with a high percentage of variable cost, that is, one that uses a lot of labor, is going to see costs rise quickly as production increases, but we'll see the costs fall quickly when production decreases. For example, if you're in the restaurant business, right? If you're somebody like McDonald's, if business is really good, if people are eating out a lot and they're eating a lot of fast food, you can hire extra people to cook and to take orders, etc. On the other hand, if times are slow, you can just hire less people or lay off some of those people. So your costs go up and down, proportionately with the demand for your product. So how do we measure operating leverage? We have something called the degree of operating leverage, DOL, and it's the percentage change in EBIT divided by the percentage change in sales. So a firm with a high degree of operating leverage will see the percentage of EBIT rise more than the percentage change in sales. A firm that does not have any fixed costs, that is, the business is totally run by labor, is going to have a degree of operating leverage of 1. That is, if sales go up 10%, then EBIT goes up 1%. Let's take a look at an example. Suppose the fixed costs are $2,000, the price per unit is 10, and the variable cost per unit is 5. Well, we know EBIT equals revenues minus cost, and revenues are going to be P times Q, price times the amount you produce, minus the fixed cost, minus the variable cost, which would be the variable cost per unit times the number of units you produce. So to compute DOL, let's find what happens when sales change by some percentage. So let's just say, for argument's sake, sales go from 1,000 to 1,500. Okay, that's a 50% increase. What happens to EBIT? Well, when you're producing 1,000, EBIT is 3,000, right? 10 times the revenue is 10 times the 1,000 units you produce, minus the fixed cost, minus the $5 per unit times the 1,000 units you produce, right? So you get $3,000 in EBIT. We're assuming that there are no taxes in this analysis here. Now suppose we go up to 1500. Okay, same thing. Take price, multiply it by the quantity, subtract out fixed costs, and then take the variable cost per unit and multiply it by the number of units, and you get 5,500. What's the percentage change in EBIT? It's 5,500 minus the 3,000 divided by the 3,000, the original amount of EBIT, and it's 0.833 or 83.33%. So the degree of operating leverage, which is the percentage change in EBIT divided by the percentage change in sales, is going to be the 83.33 divided by 50, or 1.66. What if fixed costs are 3,000, right? So the firm's using more fixed cost in their capital structure. Working through the same example, we're going to get that the change in EBIT is 1.25, so 125% instead of 83.33%. And if we look at the degree of operating leverage, it's now 2.5. So you can see that as we increase the amount of fixed cost, we increase the amount of operating leverage. What does this mean? This means that if sales go up by 1%, we expect EBIT to go up by 2.5%, right? So that leverage is a good thing. Of course, if sales go down by 1%, we don't expect EBIT to go down by 1%, we expect it to go down by 2.5%. So again, leverage magnifies those gains and losses. Good when times are good, but not so good when times are bad and you're not selling very much. So I hope you found this useful, and thanks for watching.